Okay.
It doesn't function. Oh, yes. I'll start my question. Maybe my questions are a little bit broader than Lithuanian and the Jewish question. Maybe I am the only one here in this room, except you, of course, who read my Kampf. And some years ago, I downloaded it from some neo-Nazis, Russian and English sites, and maybe it's not 100%, 90% of the text. I didn't find there no sign for the Endlosen. And if I'm right, my question is, when it's formed? Because what I read, I found much more hatred for France and then for Jews. Exactly, yeah. And it's my question for you, for us, not connected with Lithuanian, and if it is not the right day to respond to me, and you don't have to respond to me. My question is, when it's formed finally, can you allocate on the time arrow the exactly point of it? Thank you.
Now, who has read Mein Kampf? From the people here. Who has read? We have one?
Parts.
Parts?
Yes.
It's forbidden.
It's forbidden. Okay. Because this gentleman has now. This gentleman has actually read it and said there's much more hatred against the French, against the West, than against the Jews. And of killing Jews, actually there's only one paragraph where it's about killing Jews. There's this very often quoted piece of, if at the end of World War I, one had put 10 to 15,000 Jews under gas, then maybe the end would have been different, because then the Jews wouldn't have sabotaged the hinterland and the home front. So, what is Mein Kampf all about? Mein Kampf is not a history. It's a propaganda biography of Hitler explaining the German misery in the 20s. It's not a biography. Even Kershaw, with his famous Hitler biography, is still too close to this propaganda. Even Kershaw, like this excellent British historian. It is to explain to Germans what is the German problem. And the German problem is, of course, the Jews. But Versailles, which is the West, is the Jews were behind it. Yeah? And it's the same, the Jews are behind the Bolsheviks, which are the contemporary threat in the East. And they're behind the revolution, the defeat, and the democracy in Weimar. So he's explaining what's the problem with the modern world we're living in, and how will we mend it? Nazis in the middle of the 20s were tiny, nothing. They only became strong in 1930, right? At that point they were tiny, nothing. So, and they would say, how do we mend it? By getting the Jews out. Get them out of the German body, politics body. Not in the government, anyway, not in the press, not in the media, and then get them out of the economy. But most importantly, get the Jewish spirit out. And the Jewish spirit is a democratic spirit for Germany. In the West, yes, capitalist, and in the East, it's Marxist. Yeah? So the explanation there, what he's saying is, anti-Semitism is the core value of everything we do. And why is that so? Because it explains us why the world is as bad as she is. That's the point. And if I want a better world, another modernity, a strong modernity, we have to get rid of this.
Some of patricide. Killing the father. It means killing.
Well, that's a Freudian approach which I do not share, actually. It's not good for history. But it's something like that. It's something like that. Yeah. So what is much more important, what I have been doing, is to, if you're into Hitler, read what he says during the war. Read his speeches.
Not the Mein Kampf.
Not Mein Kampf is like that.
It's propaganda.
Propaganda. It's no. Read his speeches that he's giving, and he's telling the Germans what is happening, in kind of covered form, but he is. Yeah. But then, okay with that question. Further question.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask you a question? I saw your book in Yad Vashem. It is in German and I cannot read German, so the question is if it will be edition in English in the future. And if I can read there what I want to know, so I ask you, 27th of March 44, it was children action. Why? The question is why they brought the Ukrainians to do it, and what was the process of killing them? And the second question is destroying the ghetto in July 44. How it was done? A wider picture than I can read in the books, and I cannot read your book of 1,200 pages.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Question understood?
Yeah.
No? Cognigative. First of all, was about translation. A few years ago, long time we didn't find money to translate it. We didn't find money. And then, you know Tim Snyder?
Yes. Yeah.
Israelis don't like him, but he's a very good friend of me. And he's one of the smartest historians we have. Actually, I think he's wonderful. He's a good friend. And he's at Yale. And he found money to translate this. He's also one of those who have actually read the whole thing. Who don't just read reviews, but who has actually detailed things. So he's understood what we were trying to do there. And he said, okay, we find money, and then we had the first volume. It's 2 volumes because it's so translated, and then translation was so bad into English that it's now in the process of going through a language editor again. And the situation in the moment is we want to finish volume 1, which is leading up to the summer 41, and all the mass killings actually in volume 2. So that is still not even in its basic form translated. So it will be there in English, but it will take, I would say, at least 5 years. At least. Because it's so difficult. And it's, you have to, languages. It's written out of not only German. Yeah, it's Lithuanian, Yiddish, Hebrew, and so you have to trace all that in the original in order to get it properly translated. You can't use my pidgin English translations or no whatever, and you have to go back to that. So that's also why it takes time. And the Nazi language is specific, as we all know. And it's all about, very much of this is about institutional histories. And so when you ever have read a history on Nazi Germany or Nazis in Europe, it's full of those awesome, not awesome, or awful abbreviations, names you don't understand, and try to translate it. And that's why we don't even have a Lithuanian translation. Yeah, we're trying to do that and utterly failed. So we don't have one Lithuanian translator who could do that. So a light way out of this is, please look at the interview book I made with Ruta Vanagaita. Because Ruta just asked me questions. She was listening and said, Christoph, you know so much, why don't you tell us? Yeah? And then, so we sat down over 2 years, in person or via Zoom, and we were just talking, and we were recording it and then editing it. And so now it's in English, how it happened. How it happened? It's in English. How it happened.
Not the Lithuanian.
And first in Lithuania, and then a year later in English. First in Lithuanian, then in English. So it's there in English, in Lithuanian as well. So that would be a way for, but that is talkative, meant for the Lithuanian housewife, so to speak. It's more than that. It's dark bread. It's Schwarzbrot, as we would say in German. So it's easy. It's not easy to chew. And there we also talk about children's actions, and who was involved, and why Ukrainian took part in this specific action is simply because of the German rotation machine. That they would send police battalions and companies to various places outside their homeland, because they were always afraid that they might turn their weapon against Germans. Always. Yeah. So they would, but Ukrainians in Lithuania, they would not turn their weapons against Germans unless they would try to escape. And we have many cases of Lithuanian guards escaping in '44. They would just run away. Yeah. Or of Russians or of Latvians or even Estonians we have in Lithuania. Yeah. And then we find Lithuanians in Majdanek, in Belarus, in Ukraine where they would build the highway to the Crimea as a German holiday paradise. We have Jewish camps on that road leading there, and we have Lithuanians guarding them. Yeah, DG 11, so the Durchgangsstraße 11. So they would mix it up in order to avoid resistance. How the children's action happened in detail, I could read you the chapter and translate it for you. But all the children's actions for all the people talking about it were the worst thing ever. Were the worst thing ever, right? It was the sheerest nightmare. The sheerest nightmare in Kovno, in Vilna, and Shavli, and in the smaller camps as well. Of course. We have questions. Take the mic, please.
I'm sorry. I was just to add what Itamar has told. Itamar has talked about the children's action on the 27th of March 1944. There is a question that I can't ask anybody. I could ask my mother, but she had given birth to a boy in February 1942 in ghetto, and they managed to keep him out and from the children's action. And only in 1944, when the ghetto was liquidated, they parted the children from the parents.
Which ghetto are you talking about?
Kaunas ghetto. And as I'm reading a lot about Holocaust, I have even marked the book of Michelski, Kadish to Ghetto, Kovno. I can't imagine what happened to the children because they were left in the ghetto. My mother and her parents left to the train station to go to Stuttgart, and the boy was left in ghetto. And I don't know what happened there. Were they killed? Were they sent to He was 2 years and 4 months old. I can't imagine what happened to him.
Thank you very much. You've done imperial work. I've read only parts of it. I read German, but it's an awful lot to read, even for me. But we appreciate what you've done. And everyone here in this room has their own emotions and their own history and their own memory. But I have a bifold question for you, and it ties in with the fact that your research is in German. The first question is there or has there been any official Lithuanian government reaction to your work? And the second question is, what about the Lithuanian academic community reaction?
Now that's a whole new story. My basic experience here, it's a constant struggle. It's a constant struggle. When I came to Lithuania in the second half of the 90s, because in Vilna, the Vilna archive is full. Yeah, there are 80,000 files. 80,000 files on the time of German occupation alone. And files means each file has like maybe 2 pages, maybe 500 in all kinds of languages. So there's a huge amount of work to do. I maybe read about 1,500 of 80,000. So just pieces. I just scratched the surface. Yeah, there's much more to do. Yeah. So at first they were enormously helpful, but that was the 90s. Yeah. So we exchanged documents all the time. We would show each other. We would. And then there are waves of where it gets more difficult. Say, why is he talking only about 1,000 Lithuanian shooters when we know there were many thousands cooperating with the Germans? So it's kind of, hey, what's happening here? Yeah, and it goes back and forth. It depends on the democratic forces, on the sort of the open, enlightening forces in the society. It's the same with Israel. It's the same with Germany. It's a constant struggle. And we always have the ones who want those easy answers, who make, I would call it identity politics. Yeah? Who want history for their services, but not for history to irritate us. Because if we are good historians, history tells us not what we want to find. It tells us the truth, hopefully. Yeah? If we just choose and pick, we like that? And of course they can come to me and say, oh, you're not blaming us exclusively. The Jews do. They blame us. Yeah? They say, Christoph, you're on our side. I say, no, I'm not on your side. I'm only on my own side. Yeah? And also, I'm not on the Jewish side. Yeah? So I'm blaming, and I just repeat what you said. It took me years, actually. I can say that even in camera. Yitzhak Arad, a good friend of mine, who just maybe remembered, the blessing. Yeah? It took me years to get away from his narrative, because I admired him so much. To say, tell your own story, what I know from my own sources. And there are large parts which are identical, but there are parts where I have better sources than he had. Yeah, because he doesn't read Lithuanian. Yitzhak never. Yeah? But we worked in the commission together. Yeah? Dov Levine wouldn't even be interested in Lithuanian stuff. I know all the answers, he would say. I know all the answers. I know the Yiddish stuff. And he has never been to a Lithuanian archive. Never. There's only one important thing: over 200,000 Jews killed. That's all I want to know. Yeah. So it was difficult. Of course, he didn't like me. Yeah. With Yitzhak Arad was something different, because we were now on good terms. We worked in this commission together. Which was very sort of hostile environment, but we were doing good work. Don't listen to those who say, this is a red-brown commission, that's nonsense. Nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah? We were doing excellent historical work. Yeah? And nobody would interfere. Yeah? So, this goes on and on and on and on. Now, I expected, and I'm disappointed about that this English-Lithuanian book, Cape Teiviki, how that happened, would be read in Lithuania. Nobody talks about it. Many people read it. Many people read it.
Then the guy is a persona non grata.
Yeah. But this is a sequel. Yeah. But it's a book. Ruta's role is very small in this one. And the people who have read it one even said it's a game changer. Yeah. But basically, it's not selling. If you make a scandal book about where you tell cruel scenes all the time, like in Musischke, in the book with Zurov, with Ephraim, yeah, it's a bloody book. It's historically, I would say, okay, there's room for improvement, really, yeah. But 19,000 sold within no time. It's like a bloody fairy tale about villains, Lithuanian bad people. And poor Jewish victims, it's all these cliches all over, but no history. Yeah? And the first sentence in this book with Vanagaite is, history is great. It's great. It's great. It's not black and white, it's great. It's not great, it's great. It's a food. It's a food. Yeah? Great. No matter when you do serious history, No, you get away from the fairy tales, from the simple stories, beyond simple stories. That's the.
But today, this is the best book in Lithuania on this topic.
I would say yes, but but who reads it? Yeah, so that's why I'm disappointed. I thought, oh please, no, maybe in 10 years. It's a matter of timing. We don't know.
It's too late for some.
Never too late.
Yeah, but then.
At 41, half of the family was killed in Vilnius by the neighbors. How many were killed before going to the ghettos in Vilnius?
8,000. About 6 to 8,000 people were killed in the area of the ghetto, because it was always a Jewish area. So they were the first Jews to be taken to Poland.
I know, but no.
And then the deportation into the ghetto from Vilnius started inside.
How many?
Yeah, we have these different stages. So when the Germans would come in, they would kill Jewish men before even the ghettoization started, actually, right? So we have about 5,000 who were killed before the beginning of September, and then exactly, yeah, and taken for forced labor, but with Einsatzkommando 9, under Einsatzkommando 9, and then Einsatzkommando 3, we're coming in. And then we have, during the ghettoization process, they would kill Jews from the ghetto area, take them out, and then put new Jews in.
Before.
Yeah.
The Russians are out, the Germans didn't come yet.
Yeah.
In between.
The Germans were there on the 24th of June. Come on. In Vilna and Kaunas, they were there on the 24th of June. There was no time in between. There was no time
Several
in
days.
No.
No, several.
There was
It was
2 days.
One or 2 days.
It was in the Saint in
And now
Vilnius.
How
It was in
many
the
of
Saint in
those
Vilnius
2
on the
days?
first day of
Where's
Saint, by Germans. Before they captured Vilnius, they make a descent in Vilnius from air.
Yeah.
The first day,
On
the first day of
on the first days of the war.
Because when my father ran away, they already knew on the 23rd of June that Vilnius, it's the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Vilnius, it's already held by Germans.
Yeah, the Germans arrived there the 24th. Yeah. But all the refugees most of them were actually overtaken then by German troops. They were too slow.
So I hear for the first time 2 days. What do you know about those 2 days?
Everything.
only testimonies?
We know a lot about people. So the number of people.
There are a number of here now printed in Lithuania, shuras. There are some testimonies.
Šūras Rolnikaitė.
Rolnikaitė, Žana Rein, you know who I'm talking about. There are 3, 4, 5 people who testify to what happens.
We have a lot of information in the first days. We do. Yeah. And
Lithuanian and Polish neighbors.
the number of victims, if I remember right, it's about 30. It's 30 in the first. Yes, not more.
Sorry, one principal question.
Yeah.
The 4 Einsatzgruppen that were sent immediately after the regular army, Wehrmacht. I say the Einsatzgruppen that were sent after the regular army, Wehrmacht. What was there? Because in your book you say that the idea of total extermination evolved a little bit later, and the problem of food, etc., how to feed the population, and then they came up with the idea. But what were the purposes given to the Einsatzgruppen? Were they already for the extermination or for something different?
25 kilometers total extermination.
No, 25 kilometers, this is the...
Okay. Now, remember what I said about the German plans before the war. The one which is interesting for us is the decapitation plan. We Germans, don't have much time to conduct this war. We have to finish this in autumn. because of the Anglo-Saxon forces and the Americans and the British are getting ready. So in 42, Hitler says in 42, they're stronger than us, so we have to be done with the continent before that. Enormous, that's why we have a blitzkrieg here. It's the first and only planned blitzkrieg we have under the Nazis. In this, no? And that, okay, how do we accelerate our warfare? We do that, we do the same as in Poland. In Poland we killed 50,000 Polish members of the Polish elite, which eases our task of administrating running this country, because the potential opponents are gone. And now we do the same with the Soviet state. So the first remark on this we have from Hitler at the end of February. We killed, 41. End of February 41, after having discussed the issue with his administration, especially with Göring, who was running the war economy, and with Thomas, who was running the war economy for the army, and with Backe, the one who was talking about the 30 million gap of food that we have in Europe. Yeah? And then came up with the idea we have to take it from the east, to starve Russians and turn Ukrainians, Belarusians, Baltics against the Russians, and then we get it to Europe. So we don't have this gap problem of the gap of 30 million. So decapitation is a topic here. And Einsatzgruppen is for decapitation policy. We kill the potential resistors and the Soviet functionaries, so the Soviet state will collapse. Being anti-Semites, we know that bearers of the Soviet states are the Jews. They are behind it, and de facto they are with it. Yeah? So that's why we kill 200 Jews in Garstedt, 300 Jews in Taurage, 200 in, I don't remember the numbers exactly, in Kretinga.
400 in Kunigishke's forest.
Yeah, at first almost exclusively Jewish men as part of the decapitation policy. And the task was Ruhe und Sicherheit im Hinterland. So stability and security in the hinterland, meaning behind the fronts. Now, we don't only have the Einsatzgruppen, which is 3,000 men, coming up, because the hinterland is of course huge. And in the debate in May 41, when they were discussing robbing the Soviet harvest to feed the German sort of Europe under German control, they wanted to rob the complete harvest. And in the discussions in May, we find it in the book as well, we Germans need at least 500,000 men to do that. 500, 500,000. The whole attacking army was 3 million. And not only Germans, but also Hungarians, and some French and Spanish, blah, blah, blah. So 500,000 just for the hinterland to rob the economy. And when General Quartermaster Wagner was talking to the generals, in the protocol it notes laughter in the room, Gelächter im Raum. Ho, 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 we're coming to God, we're going to rob them, ha, 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 with so many people. But they didn't have 500,000 people. They didn't have them. Yeah? So because the amount of soldiers attacking the Soviet Union was basically the same as attacking France. Basically the same number. And we knew that the Germans knew the Red Army is strong. They're outnumbering us actually as a defending force, which is difficult. Everybody from the army knows, as an attacking fighter you have to be stronger than the defenders. So then they came up with a number of 360,000. We need at least, that's the minimum, we need at least, meaning 180 Germans for each county in the whole territory to be administered, to rob the economy. 180 Germans per county. I told you per county how many Germans were there? None. Statistically, they had only at the beginning 21, with an underperformance of 90%, 21 instead of 180 per county. So, big problem. And the functionary said, if we don't manage to do this in the summer 41, we will lose the war. Overall. We will lose the world war now. Because the opponents are too strong. The opponents are too strong. So we have to get either UK on our side, which they didn't. We can't even bomb them to our side. Churchill was stubborn, wouldn't go as a minor partner with the Germans, and that was a luck for Europe, of course. And so instead of getting England on our side, we have to get the Soviet Union on our side, and they don't want No, and we don't want them as partners, we want them subjugated, as colony. Yeah? And then we are strong enough to fight the British and the Americans. That's the basic scenario. And we have to do that till the autumn. Leningrad, we have to conquer in July. Yeah? And the attack on Leningrad had to be postponed on the way through Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia and the Russian hinterland before Leningrad 7 times for logistical reasons alone. Not because there were some fighting, for logistical reasons alone. There was no supplies. They couldn't move. So the picture is not one of the almighty German planes and tanks and everything. 2,000 planes for the whole tanks, for the whole attack. Nothing. Most of the Germans were riding bicycle or walking. Yeah, like Napoleon, the same. Like Napoleon. If you ask for the experience of German soldiers in the first 4 weeks of the war, marching, marschieren, in the heat. Hardly any fights. And only at the old Stalin line, at the old Soviet border, there the fighting started. Because the Red Army was retreating. And that's why this whole Barbarossa failed completely. They were planning to encircle the Red Army immediately in Garstein-Kretinga, immediately behind the border. They wouldn't go away. Tanks would go through, cut the way back, and then the infantry would come and annihilate armies.
So Stalin's retreat was actually very clever.
That was why, yes, exactly.
Because everybody said he was such a fool. Why did he do it?
And the orders were actually counterattack.
Learn from Kutuzov.
Yeah, the actual orders, when the Russian orders, we have it from the Stavka, counterattack, take the war to Prussia. And the people on the ground, what are you kidding? We're just coming from vacation.
But 2 million of Soviet soldiers surrounded until September.
Exactly. But where? Yeah, but not at the beginning. And where do they come from? They come from the center then. And at the beginning, Hitler asked, you can read that in the military diaries. Yeah? Wo sind all die Gefangenen? Where are all the prisoners? Goebbels in his diary. No, we are only fearing that the Red Army retreats. Yeah? But the only thing quoted is the remark from middle of July, we have won the war basically. Euphoria. The Herrenmenschentum. No, they were panicking. The headquarters was panicking. And for 4 weeks until Operation Barbarossa was cancelled in the 3rd week of July. In the 3rd week of July, 19th and 23rd of July, you have the big orders from Hitler saying, forget about the big scene, make circulations where you can. And don't stop asking me for personnel to secure the hinterland. Use terror to do that. That's the 23rd, 24th of July. Check the documents. 23rd, 24th of July. And then Operation Typhoon is planned July. And then Operation Typhoon is planned in August. Operation Typhoon is the successor to Barbarossa, the attack on Moscow. Yeah, which then started and which then sort of triggered the second wave of killings. In Galicia, you have the main killings in October. Or Ukraine, main killings in October 41. Belarus, September, October 41. Following the Baltic example. So there is a link here. Yeah. So what was the question? Huh?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Anyway, it's very
I wanted to make a curve to this.
So again, we come back to the Ukrainians and the others, learning from the Lithuanians. They already did it.
But from the German policy in Lithuania, not from the Lithuanians. It's a big difference. It's a big difference.
But how do you explain the difference in the choice of Lithuanian people?
Take the microphone, please.
How do you explain?
No, for the record, we are recording.
Was there a difference in the choice?
I remember the question was about the Einsatzkommando. I come back to that.
Was there a difference in the choice of the Lithuanian people comparing to other nations? Like you said in your explanation, there is a choice. So was there a difference in the choice? If not, what does it explain it? How do you explain it?
process is always complicated. Each case is unique. Each case has its specific story. Each group, each society, each region. So I would never say it's all the same. Yeah? It doesn't make a difference. But in principle, there was no difference. We find this almost unconditional cooperation with the Germans almost everywhere. No, where not? I find it almost everywhere. Right? And but this doesn't mean that we shouldn't look. Maybe we find specificities, but as historical, based on evidence. We don't know. We have so many post-war narratives going around, and we have to get through that cloud. Like me from the German side, I have to get beyond all the justifications of what happened in the post-war time. Yeah. So, and we have to do that for Lithuanians have to do the same work. Yeah. They have all these post-war narratives trying to externalize responsibility. So I'm propagating in the moment constantly, we have to take responsibility for our history in all its shades. And think about power and think about choice. Yeah? And very often we are judging from hindsight. We're sitting there as judges, not as historians who don't know how it ended. And the difficulty as historians is we don't know how it ended. When you look at what's happening from June 41, the picture is of course very different than when you look at it from May 45. It's a huge difference, but for everybody. And as historians we have to go back, forget about what happened between 42 and 45. Go back to 41, to the hopes, the expectations. I termed it expectations. And we can reconstruct those expectations from the documents, and from the testimonies, and from the memoirs, and from everything. Yeah? And if we do that properly, sort of in a plausible, methodologically, sort of more or less clean form, then we're on the safe side and can actually make arguments, which must be based on evidence, which is based on sources. Okay, so that's how I would answer to that. Again, with a method. There was another question. I'm answering with a method, not with content. Yeah. So that's why we have to learn together. Now, I remember the question I was trying to answer before about the Einsatzkommandos, because we often isolate the Einsatzkommando out of the context. The numbers, 500,000 are needed. We don't have them. And then the functionaries came up with a number of 360,000 are needed. We don't have them. And then Himmler said, I get them. I get the numbers to secure the hinterland and make the robbery. And he started gathering. So in April he founded the Reichskommandostab Führer SS. A troop of 18,000 SS soldiers, apart from the Einsatzkommandos. Einsatzkommandos is 3,000. And then in April they said Reichskommandostab Führer SS in the Pripyat marshes. And after Army Group Center they were operating. Another 18,000, so we have 21,000. And then he said, okay, now we go together with the police, with mobile police battalions, and we go to the Wehrmacht for security divisions and cooperate with them. So the overall, and we found over 50,000 of that personnel. So overall, the personnel we have is 98,000 security personnel for the hinterland, instead of 360,000, which was considered the minimum. So what do you do? If you have two ways of getting out of this. One is, as Hitler can confirm in July, terror. If you're weak, bomb them into fear. So to spread terror, nobody wants to move. Create stability through terror and arm non-Germans to a limited extent beneath the barrier of national interests. And that's why we have in July, we have arming of non-Germans. Something that Hitler otherwise would never have allowed, never have given permission. Why not? World War I. He would say, in World War I, we gave the Polish army to fight against the Russian army. What happened? 700,000 Poles in arms, and what do? They create their own state. This was fundamental for his thinking. And now they said, okay, beneath the national sort of barrier, the Schwelle, what is the Schwelle?
Threshold.
Threshold, that's it, that's the word, thanks. threshold, we can do that. So you can have weapons, but not as police and soldiers, but as Hilfspolizei, helping police, and as Schutzmänner. That is not soldiers, but basically it was the same function. And we don't give them to fight at the front. Lithuanians were begging to fight at the front, the Bolsheviks. Germans would say, no, you are here for the hinterland, like guard the store, guard the ghettos, guard the stores, guard the harvest, whatever.
Not only to guard, to shoot.
And to shoot, of course, but on paper you don't find to shoot, you find to guard. Yeah. And then of course, and the shooting units, there were special units. We have 3 special shooting units. The Hamann Commando, we all know, right? That is Kaunas. Vilna, we have the Ypatingas Būrys. And they were part of the German security police. They were not part of the general... and in Šiauliai, we have members of the 14th Schutzmannschaftsbataillon.
German?
Lithuanian, under Požela. So we have 3 killing units. Murder commandos who would do nothing but shoot, but kill. Yes, but those are smaller units. Those are smaller, and the border strip is special. It's really special. You have to take it out of the picture.
How many again, please? About these 3 groups, the Lithuanian.
These 3 groups. So
how many? Each one more or less?
Just a few hundred each. So the Ypatingas Būrys in Vilna, we have the names. It's like between 80 and 120. And they would go to Punar, and they would go to Vilna Vesviva and make the shootings. Yeah? And then they would take local policemen, local partisans, non-policemen, but under German command. And say, please join us. Yeah? And they were not forced. Those killer commandos, they were military units, police units. No, they were routine. And if you ask them, they would remember the first shooting, the second shooting, the third shooting, and then they wouldn't remember even. It's all one big work. If that's end of 41, beginning 42, all the same. And they would go from village to village to village to village. So for them it was like routine. And they would come in after the preparations were done. Germans would say, okay, or the Lithuanian county chiefs would come, we will get the order, there's going to be a shooting, so prepare everything. Dig the ditches, get the Jews, isolate them, get them out, and get them to the place. And then on the day when the shooting commandos would come, they would come in, shoot and leave. Yeah? Joined by locals. But the actual process was done on the spot. Yeah? This is outside, this is province, this is different from the city, it's different from Vilna. Yeah? So in the province, they would do that. And then, Požela and his troops in the north, they would go around in July and August, when you have those 50, 60,000 victims there. Yeah? And you would have Einheitskommando 9 in the south. Yeah? So, that's combination. Meaning, the 2 answers are terror and armed, non-German police, but under control them. So Einheitskommando was part of this, and the task was the same. The task was for all of these forces the same. Secure the hinterland, for stabilization of the hinterland and the home front.
And eventually shooting the Jews.
And then to do that, terror means shooting the Jews, and it was then widened. And for Lithuania, for the north, I'm claiming we have the orders on the 2nd of August. Civil administration is in, and the first draft is there. What are we supposed to do? We are cleaning the countryside from Jews.
That's not security for the German army.
It is. Why?
It's not the first World War, but they start saying, okay, the Jews are traitors.
It is. I'll explain why.
Christoph, I'm just going to have to leave, but Mark's going to continue.
Yes, of course.
Okay. And I want to thank you so much. Really, thank you so very much.
So you're continuing with this?
No, he's taking...
Very good question, because that's exactly the point we have to understand. In that region, in the north of the attack on the Soviet Union in July, August, September, Army Group North. Army Group North means 800,000 men, Germans, going into the region, which have supplies for 20 days. And then from that point on, they have to be supplied from the hinterland, from the immediate hinterland. And you have, through Lithuania, you have basically two routes of supply. Yeah? It's one goes here and one goes here. That's it. And then you have a crooked route to Belarus, to Vilna. Huh?
What year?
From 41. So you have only a very few routes where larger supplies can go. So this is very limited. And that's why the Germans said, take it from the surroundings. Yeah? Middle of August comes also the order, we won't finish this in time. We wanted to finish the war in 41. In July it becomes clear we have to prepare for 42. Even though we didn't want that. We have to prepare. Yeah? So Operation Typhoon, which was planned then, meant attack on Moscow, but not to finish the war. That's just the propaganda. The actual tactical aim was to get ready for 42. If you read the military history, we need military history in a proper form. Yeah? And then, meaning, how do you secure the hinterland? The Germans were thinking about starving Lithuanian peasants. And then they said, no, we can't do that. Because then we lose the balance. We don't have the personnel to secure them. So instead, we're going to starve the groups we know, we can control. First of all, Soviet prisoners of war. It's the main reason why they don't get anything to eat. Exactly that. And the local German commandants said, this is unbearable, we have to give them. And they said, every bread that you give those, your soldier and your family at home doesn't get to eat. That's your choice. And what would they say? Yeah? So with the Jews it's more difficult, because the Jews were needed. The Germans, they hadn't understood that the Jews were integrated in those societies. And that's why they said, okay, for a time being, we have to get big ghettos, labor ghettos, until we can replace. But Jews, we want to get rid of them anyway. Yeah? So let's select them, selection in the city, killing in the countryside. Now, in the countryside, there's an own story to this. And here it's both, it's Lithuanian and Germans. And we have sort of, the deliberations come from both sides based on documents. We have 100 ghettos in the region. You know, each one of those near 400, 500, 600, bigger ones, smaller ones, and they had to be fed each week. And now the Lithuanians were in charge of that. They couldn't want to let the Jews out, so we have to. And anything you read about these small ghettos, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. Now, it pops up now in the border strip. In the border strip, we have a discussion in Kretinga, where the locals meet and say, what are we going to do with the surviving children and women and old and elderly men? And then the argument comes up from the German side and from the Lithuanian side, from both sides. Yeah? The most human way would be to kill them now.
They killed the men.
Yeah, they were already dead. They were gone. They were gone. You just have suffering rest of Jewish communities in the hundreds. So in the second wave of killing, after the Jewish men, the numbers you have is like 800 children, 400 women, and 200 elderly men. Those are the numbers then. And they would say, okay, now we have to do it. And then they made experiments how to do that.
July, August.
In July, August, yes. End of July, beginning of August already. Experiments also in the border strip. Pioneers, German pioneers coming in, exploding near Taurage, burying the people and putting them in holes and exploding them. As a human solution to this situation of the 90 ghettos, or 100 ghettos. So this process is coming, and so if you look at it in detail, like day by day by day by day by day, and you look widely, you find so much.
You know, it responds to many years wondering. Only anti-Semitism is not enough for me to explain it. Yeah. You just explained it.
No, anti-Semitism is in everything of this, in everything.
Yes, but it's not. It's necessary, but not enough.
It doesn't explain the timing, and it doesn't explain the space.
Yes.
I want to ask the question of Jäger report.
Yeah.
Because once I thought, assumed that German. I'll try to talk. I'll try to talk loud. I assumed for years that German punctuality and precision means that Jaeger report should be precise.
Yes.
But after that I realized, based on the story in my mother's town, Kedainei, that in the Jaeger report it is written that there were killed 2,076 people, men, so on. And but relying on some very reliable testimony of a person who almost get out of the killing pit, we know that there should be around 3,700. And it is also recorded in some in the testimony that he gave in Vilnius KGB in 50s. Okay. So what is your experience with the precision of the Jaeger report?
I mean, we are here in Vilna community. Now, which huge mass murder case from Vilna ghetto is missing in the Jaeger report? Sorry? Which big action is missing in the Jaeger report on Vilna? Yom Kippur. What? Yom Kippur. 1st of October 41. It's missing. Why? It's not recorded. It gets a list on the actions in the Vilna ghetto because after August, Einheitskommando Commander 3 was responsible for the shooting in Vilna. Yeah. So why is it missing?
The Jews didn't write it.
Because it was it got criticism from above because the Yom Kippur action was too wild, too many workers killed, and so he just took it out.
Too many workers
killed.
Jews.
Yeah, they were supposed to kill the Jews. And the Yom Kippur action was 4,000 almost. It was just randomly causing too many problems. And so he got Gegenwind.
So all these threats of the Germans that they will liquidate the ghetto during these 2-3 years, they were just threats. Actually, because they needed the people to work.
Yes, but
who could work?
They needed the doctors in Vilnius till 1944 again.
Yeah, but this is different question. This is different question. Now, let's come to this in a second. John. Let's first talk about the German numbers. The German numbers. I think it's because we all have the colonial view on the East. They are somehow. We have Lithuanian police acting in all of this, right? And they have their own records. They have their own records and their own bureaucracy. So if, yes, we have it. So if you cite the German numbers and the Lithuanian numbers, and you ask anybody in the West, which numbers do you trust?
German?
Of course.
Much more.
We are pedantic. We are exact. Yeah. And nothing could be more from the truth. Yeah? Because of course we have to check this source, the German source, just as we check the German, the Lithuanian, the Jewish source, the Polish, the whatever source. We don't, as historians, I mean, you've heard it from me, we don't believe anything we read. We don't believe nothing. Yeah, we are skeptical. So if Jaeger report says there are no Jews left, border strip again, no Jews left in Jurbarkas. Georgenburg. 3rd of July, killing Jurbarkas, 300 Jurbarkas, Georgenburg. Yeah. And Jaeger report, beginning of September, the first version, there's a second version from December, first version September. There's no Jews left in Jurbarkas. And then you read in the Lithuanian administration, 200 Jews working in Jurbarkas. So what do you believe? Of course you believe the German side.
What about Stalker?
So what we have to get in our heads is so to treat German documents just as critical as we do any documents. Yeah. So and if you compare those two versions of the Jaeger reports we have from September and from December, what do they write about the Lithuanians attacking Jews? They differ. They differ. In the second one, they say they did it out of their own. They did it out of their own initiative. In the first one, they just said they participated.
They did.
No?
They did.
So you believe the second one, and I don't.
In my blood.
Yes. We want to believe. So what else? So the message is clear, right? So check the Jaeger and be aware that this covers. I said it in the lecture, covers only part of the area, and the most sort of the one in the north is Einheitskommando 2. They also sent reports like this, but they didn't. We don't have that.
The question. No, you have German still starker reports. Starker reports. You have it.
Stahlecker. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but just I want to ask, still, when transport were arriving at the concentration camps in Stutthof, Dachau, we have a record of everybody who went in. In all these stories in Lithuania, we don't have the names. I mean, as far as I understand, in no place anybody was recording the names.
Not true.
Just a minute.
1942.
Just a minute. I'm talking about 41.
You're talking about the German transports coming, German, Austrian, and Austrian transport coming to Kaunas, right?
No. I'm talking, for example, in the town of my mother. Yeah? These are 700 men, 600 women, let's say, so on. But nobody took care of record the names. Have you, in your experience, found in historical archives maybe the records of Lithuanian police that had done this extermination and recorded the names?
The lists. They were killed on the spot. Yes, they were not transported. We don't have transport lists. We don't have transport lists. We only have. You can collect those from the communal archives. Yeah, from the synagogue, from the Beit Knesset, from the taxpayers, and if they had camps, like labor camps for a period of time, then we have some names. But basically, you wouldn't record. You would just want to disappear.
I'd like to have a question about.
Take the microphone.
I would like to confront your idea that Germans are responsible for everything, and in a way give a waiver to the local. Let me finish. And according to a lot of stories, there was initiatives, a lot of actions, but were done by the local Lithuanians. Now, when you are saying that the responsibility, in a way, was something that has been guided by the Germans, it gives the local people, till now, till today, the way to run out from this responsibility. As an historian, which are following only, I would say, fixed information, or constant information, what do you think about it?
I have not been convinced by this. I have not been convinced. I looked at all the cases I could look at, and I have not been convinced that I have not been persuaded.
Did you try the documents which are in the Lithuanian KGB archives?
Of course.
And first of all, there are lists of some places where they have the list of the victims.
Yeah, in Garza and Crete.
Not just. That's first of all. Second, there were many trials after the war where the leaders and the killers, the Lithuanian ones, were tried by the Soviet authorities, and these protocols exist in these KGB archive. And these people who ever survived the 25 years in Siberia, they came back to some of them came back to this same village where they did what they did. And everything was the same community again. So it's very difficult to believe that the Germans they were around, yeah, they were in Shaulai. But we were about 100 kilometers from there. There was no one who gave the orders. And then also the things which I personally heard from the old people, Lithuanians, who told me about how it happened. And there was no German around, and no written probably order.
But they don't, look at my book. You have for each county, you have the orders. For each county. Now you have the Lithuanian administrator, you have the county chief, you have the county police.
The man was not a policeman.
Wait. For each county, in July, August, you have the county police, the one responsible for in the bureaucratic order. It would come from Schaule, from the German Gebietskommissar. That's what I'm telling you. It would come from the German Gebietskommissar in Schaule, then to the county chief in Kedene, yeah, or in what have you there, in Majeke, or in Telche, or in Kritika, or in Lassendi, or in
Konkretnie Palanka, was Pranas Yakis.
Yeah, I know. So but that was the chain of events which you can't ignore, and which you do ignore. Yeah, you have the center, you have the Gebietskommissar. Then he would gather them in Schaule. You have a protocol from the meeting, and you have follow-up orders to the county chiefs. Now ghettoize the Jews there and there, and then they isolate them, take the property, do this. And we have, from some counties, we have the full correspondence. From some counties, we just have pieces. Yeah? But so there is a very close chain of orders going here. We have one, the so-called Levitis file, which is not in Schaule, but in Kaunas County. Yeah? Where you have all the answers from the single villages. You know, from the Amtsbezirk. There's the lowest level. You have the answers to Kaunas County, then back to Kaunas City.
At what time?
This is July, August. So to say, when some Lithuanian says there were no Germans, of course there were no Germans, there were only a few around, but they were behind it. And that is my argument, the framework is true. And if Lithuania...
Did anybody force this man to do his work?
That's a different question. It's a different question. Responsibility is shared. So if you say Lithuanians were initiative for the killing of the Lithuanian Jews, it's wrong. It's simply wrong. Yeah? If you say Germans were responsible, I say yes, but only with Lithuanian cooperation. They could not have done it without. No way. And that is the Lithuanian guilt. And that's the Lithuanian responsibility. If they had said no, as they have said in many other respects, 2 years later, Germans want to mobilize 20,000 Lithuanian men to fight the Bolsheviks. What has happened? Nobody comes. Nothing happens. They sent 48 to the concentration camp, 48 intellectuals. Yeah? And otherwise the Germans didn't have the means to punish them, even though the mobilization failed utterly. They said, we don't do that. Meaning they could have said so as well in 41. Another example, killing mentally disabled. Autumn 43, alongside the destruction of the Vilna ghetto, Germans say we need to get rid of those 400 ethnic Lithuanian disabled. They're just a burden. We don't need them. The minute this was communicated to Lithuanians, it went viral, we would say today. And immediately, so Lithuanian doctors and politicians would say, this mustn't happen. And the Germans would immediately say, no, we don't. So, meaning what the Lithuanians thought, this is good for our case, we go against. And we don't cooperate, we don't obey. Yeah? When the Jewish mentally disabled were killed in autumn 41, without any hindrance. Yeah? And that is the difference, to explain the Lithuanian behavior. Yeah? So if you look at it like this, it gets clearer what happens.
I want to ask you a question. This one, short question.
Take the mic.
My question is, my family came from Holocaust, and I came there. And in the middle of the city there is a swastika, but not a big monument and a swastika. So, how do you explain this phenomenon?
In short.
I don't understand.
Now,
Which swastika is there?
It was 2 years ago. You go today to Okishkis in the middle of the town.
Even the same, on the
In the
door.
middle of the
I
town.
have no idea.
It's fascist Christ.
I don't know anything about
fascist Christ.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. I don't know.
This, I can
I
tell
don't
you.
know. I don't know.
Hakenkreuz.
I have no idea.
Yes.
He's speaking about Hakenkreuz.
Yes, but why is everyone אני חייב לדעת.
לא, אתה ודאי שלא.
תודה רבה. תודה רבה לך.
Let's go.
שנייה, אני רוצה רק לתת לו תשובה קטנה, ותודה רבה.
Sorry, Boria.
תודה רבה לך. רגע. זה משהו קטן, מאגודת כלכלה. It's very simple. If you open, you will see.
Lovely, yes. I want to open now or later?
You wish.
No, I do it in privately, rather.
Okay, it's not sweet.
Christoph, thank
Thank
you.
you very much. It was a great
Amazing, huh? תודה רבה. Thank you so much.
ברמה מעל ומעבר.